Aye, the plan. We're going to start here and leave Conway in the morning at 6 o'clock and make our way down the Straits. When we get to Abbermenai, we're going to stop and we're going to have a little bit of lunch, and then we're going to move round to the other side to Clandau Island, ready for the next day, where we're going to cross the Irish Sea all the way to this port at the end called Wicklow. Well, that's the plan. Wind conditions were ideal for starting at 13-14 knots. On a reach means don't have to use any engine. A dairy little bit at the beginning of the trip, nipping over the banks on a fallen tide, but I think I've got plenty of water, so I won't panic too much just at this stage. Well, this is it, first day of our holidays. Well, it's not the first day, it's the third day, but we took our time to get going, so it's the first day we've actually got sailing. And it's been red hot. The temperature's been 20 odd degrees and the sun's been blaring. We set off this morning, it's been cloudy and it's been pretty cool, so I've got a jumper on and a gilet on underneath that. Well, we're getting a little bit of wind, so we can't complain. So we're doing alright, and we've started, so that's good. Update later, bye. Drifting along is a great way to sail. Misty Isle, 8 o'clock in the morning, getting ready to go out for a sail. Well, it is bank holiday weekend, and the fishermen are out nice and early as well. There they are on the banks. Well, we do a low water transit and we get through to Abbermenai quite quickly, which is our chosen anchorage for lunch, or for the afternoon more or less, until we go out of Bellon Point. There's a couple of boats here enjoying the place when we get here. So get lunch and get chilled. Oh, I'll have to show you a little bit of what's easy to chill on now. Lisa's made these. These are new boat cushions for the back. She's very proud of them. She's very proud of the way she's piped all the edges as well. At the end of the afternoon, it seems like everybody's departed Abbermenai. And it's only the Sunday, so you think they'd all be still here. But no, they've vanished and we're here all alone. Must have been something I said. But we're going to depart ourselves now because we're going down to Clandau Bay for the night. Well, off we go in the evening light, through the Voyage system and past the Mussel Bank, over to the little island over there sticking out on the end. That's where we'll spend the night. Looks like there's something down there. Well, it's the next day. Early in the morning, we're not moving. The anchor's not dragged. There's no wind to speak of, 3-point-something knots. So let's get the kettle on to get underway. It's looking like it's going to be a brighter start to the day anyway. We've got plenty of sunshine coming up over Carnarvon there. And the boats from the anchorage from last night, oh, well, there was a few. There's rocks somewhere around here in different places, and everybody's spread out around the rocks. Still, especially with a bit of north and east in it, this is a chosen anchorage round here for sure. Even with the odd rocks sticking up around the boat, doesn't seem to bother anyone. And we're off. And the forecast is force 3 to 5 northeast for the day. So hopefully it'll come sooner rather than later. But it hasn't arrived yet, so we're setting off with our sails up and our motor running, just watching the lobster pots go by. Looking back when you depart in Anglesey, what you can see is the Llyn Peninsula. The huge hills on it, and they seem to go for miles and miles and miles. They're normally black in the morning and green in the night because the sun shifts its way round, but they seem to go on for a long, long way. And north of me up there, well, that's Holly Island with Holyhead on. Can feel a little bit of air now, but we're still motoring really. The sails are just starting to gather a little bit of shape. Only 50 miles to go. It'd be nice if the wind came out. We're doing okay speed-wise, but we don't want to be using a load of fuel. I want to keep about 5 knots up if I can, so the passage doesn't really take much past 12 hours. So I've got the motor running at low revs to keep the speed up. So we've got a bit of wind and a bit of motor at this moment in time because there's not a lot of wind, but it's given us our 5 knots, and that's what's important. Oh, and I'm only using the head sail on its own because it's a little bit aft the wind, and what happens then is if we put the mainsail up, it sheets the head sail and the head sail starts flapping its head off. but at the moment it's happy because it's cupped. Talking about being cupped, let's have a brew. Oh, and I made a tiny little bit of a table there that goes on top of the hob so that as the boat rocks, the cups don't spill any tea. Very clever, eh? The weather's turning out really nice today, but believe it or not, there's a really cold bit of snap in that breeze. It's supposed to get up to 16 today, temperature-wise, but I don't think the air feels like it's 16. We haven't got very strong winds at the moment. We've got enough just to fill the foresail and just help us motor sail. Keeping my fingers crossed this 3 to 5 pulls in fairly soon and lets us get on with the job. Well, I've just spotted the ship coming up there. We're not really on a collision course. He's going to pass after us. He's over there somewhere, but you can't see him. But he is 10 miles away. But 10 miles you can sometimes see, depending. And he's 5 miles away, and he's clearly going to pass our stern. And at 5 miles, here he is at 2 miles. But even that's zoomed in. It looks like the wind's started to fill in now anyway. So we've put the engine down to neutral for a bit to see how we sail on our own. But she seems to be just about managing the 5 knots. So we'll keep this up and keep our fingers crossed that it's in for the day now. This route doesn't normally have many ships on it at all because we're below the Holyhead Dublin sort of crossing area, and that's why we've chosen this route, because it's normally a quiet passage. But you do get the odd one or two, but it normally only is an odd one or two. Unlike the Holyhead to Dublin passage, where you don't normally get a second to yourself, except for jotting down ship's degrees.
Voyage automatic, north-northwest, 3 knots, fair, 14 miles, 1,027 steady. Nice head automatic, east, 13 knots, fair, 15 miles, 1,029.
I'm happy to say we're getting the advertised conditions of 3 to 5 now. Also the slight sea, which will make this passage very enjoyable. A slight sea and somewhere around 18 knots of wind, hopefully, which should keep my canvas filled nicely and keep our pace up where we want it, around the 5 knot mark. Although she's starting to deliver a lot more than the 5 knot mark now, and we're closer to 5.5 continuous, touching 6 every now and then. And we're still only running on 14 knots, 15 knots of wind. With only 25 nautical miles to go, we seem to be doing really well. Now the wind at the moment also is with the tide, and there's not a great deal of wind and there's not a great deal of tide because it's neaps, but they are together. And I suppose that's why the sea is so flat and is such a good slight out in the middle of the St. George's Channel. If only we could guarantee it to be like this all the time, the boats would be back and forth a hell of a lot more. Well, it's freshened up a little bit and we're really enjoying the power now as we're ploughing through the water. These seem to be ideal conditions for Swallow for passage making. We've got around 18 knots of breeze now and it's on a broad reach. We're carrying almost full sail. The Genoa's all out, but the main has one reef in it. That's just to keep the helm balanced. And she seems very smooth and upright. This will turn out to be a very pleasurable passage if we carry this all the way. My only concern in front of me is if we get a little bit more wind when the tide turns, we might get a little bit of wind over tide situation and lose this lovely slight we've got. We're now at the bottom of tide, slack water at the bottom of tide. It'll now start flooding, which will mean it'll be coming against us. And if we're going to get any wind over tide, that'll start to kick in pretty soon. Gone back inside for a warm-up. Freezing it is. Well, it's probably not freezing, it's probably me just being nesh. But you get in here behind the glass and the sun soon warms you up anyway. You're seeing all the same things. It's just a little bit more comfortable, and I haven't got the draft down the back of my neck. It's certainly not 16 degrees in the breeze, and the wind, well, it's coming from the east, so that's why it's always got a bite in it, even if it is summer. So I'll take these little opportunities to warm me cockles, thanks. There's a few things starting to happen at the moment. We are starting to get a bit of slight wind over tide, but also we've had an increase of wind. It's now pushed into the low 20s, which is supposed as they turn around and forecast that it's 3 to 5. Well, the low 20s is the top of a 5 and probably into a 6. So we're getting a little bit more breeze now than we were supposed to have, but I'll keep this sail plan up for a little bit and see what happens. Obviously with the extra breeze comes an extra bit of power, and we've climbed up over the 6 knot mark, which is really going for Swallow. But as you can see, she's not messing around. Her bows are cleaning her way through that water. I think we should have a slow-mo of this for dramatic effect. That's enough of that. I'm not after any awards for sailing across here. But I do need to show you what I'm doing over the ground against the tide. And it's over 6 knots. Which is, to me, probably some of the best speeds I've had out of Swallow punching tide over the ground at 6.5 knots. I think she's going really well at this particular moment in time. But we have got 20 plus knots and we've still got near full sail up, so that probably says to me maybe I should be looking to put a little bit of a reef in sooner rather than later. The other thing is though, she's not feeling any pressure, she's not heeling or anything, she's still just singing along. But because the water's getting a little bit lumpy, she's making a bit more of a song and dance about it. It would be really nice though if it was as warm as it looked. That's not a grey sky either that you're looking at. It's actually a blue sky. It's just like there's a haze on the sea. And there's a fishing boat out there. Can you see it in the distance? He looks like he's maybe bobbling round a little bit in the water there while he's putting his pots down or his nets or whatever he's up to. I suppose if you were stationary in this, it would be a little bit up and down because it's a little bit up and down where I am. So I wouldn't fancy trying to do any work on a deck on a boat that was going nowhere. But then again, I'm not a roughy-tufty fisherman, am I? I'm your average namby-pamby sailor who likes to go out on the nice days and not get thrown around far too much. And this is getting a little bit bumpy now out here. If I could have had the extra wind this morning when I needed it, and the lack of wind now, that would have suited me better because it would have kept the sea down a little bit and I'd have made my pace up this morning, which would have got me further on the ebb, which would have been sensible. But there you go. You can't win everything all of the time. Just enjoy it while you've got it. Looking at the fishing boat zoomed in, I am. It does look a little bit roly-poly on there. So I'd say no thank you very much to being a fishing boatman out there fishing in this. And with that, no further ado, I'm going to sit back down inside and watch the world go by from the comfort of my chair again with a nice cup of tea, I think. Oh, and I'll warm up a little bit again. I wonder what it looks like from the comfort of your home looking out at the sea bouncing by. Swallow's doing a little bit of ducking and diving at the moment. Her bows aren't straight all the time. She's climbing up over some waves and dipping down over other ones. But she's still staying fairly much in her groove and fairly comfortable. although the odd waves now started jumping on my windows. Got drips everywhere, and I cleaned them all before I started as well. Well, I've had to put a little twirl in the foresail because it was starting to get a little bit overpowered, and swallow was starting to heal up to 10 to 15 degrees, and we don't want that because it makes it much harder for dipping your biscuits in your tea. If you look a little bit further ahead of me now, you can actually see land in the distance. Well, land in the distance will only get closer, won't it? So we'll just keep punching along here until we get a bit closer, and then we'll be there. Lisa said it's too bumpy. She's had enough. She's gone to bed. She'll be fast asleep now, but I'll be waking her up when we get to land to get the lines at least. Oh, that black thing's not on your telly. That's my windscreen wiper on the windscreen. Yeah. The dark patch you can see ahead of us, well, that's Wicklow Head, and that's the bit that's on the chart just there, which is that bit there. And we're not a million miles away now, but we've probably got an hour or two to go. And it appears to have gone very lumpy out there now, so I'm definitely staying in here, as every now and then a wave decides to jump over the boat and get anybody who's daft enough to be outside soaking wet. So I'm staying in here where it's warm and definitely dry, or I'm hoping it's going to stay dry inside anyway. Well, I've took quite a long way round as well, and I'm starting to head up the wind just a little bit. And the reason being is I went south to avoid some overfalls and to make the best use of the tide, and now I'm going north to make the best use of the tide as well. But I've got this wind over tide situation to deal with at the same time, and it's a constant 5 and 6. So we're absolutely flying along in it. Well, when I passed between north of Arklow Bank but south of India Bank, when you've passed where all the windmills become in line and you pass through it, the water calms down. As you can see, there's a big difference here from what it was like on the other side. It's much smoother. Well, this smooth water, I think, benefits from there's less current here, so there's less wind over tide reaction. But because I'm travelling a little bit now more north in my course to make where I want to go, I'm starting to become a close beat from a reach, and that will slow my boat down a little bit, unfortunately, but not too much. Oh, and the other good thing is the winds drop down to about 18 knots here, which is nice because that makes a little bit of a difference as well. You could almost say I'm inland now. The wind's coming down here, 17, 16 knots. We're still doing over 4 knots into the ebb and also into the wind now as well, which is hard work for poor little Swallow. But we literally are on the last 2 miles. So that little bit of land you can see just in front of us on the left hand side there will house a safe haven, hopefully, called Wicklow. Well, keep my fingers crossed that it's still there, because it should be. That's what the lighthouse looks like on Wicklow Head. A couple of chimneys by it as well, so quite easy to spot. Even in the last couple of miles, the water seems stretched and choppy a little bit, still making us bounce around a little bit in the cockpit with our cameras. As you can see, my footage goes all over the place. Well, we're bouncing into the last couple of waves, I think it is, just before we get there. I'm not sure if it would be sensible to actually stick the sails away or not at the moment, because we're only a mile outside and motoring the last little bit. But like I said, I'm not sure. Right, well, we're just about outside. We're running out of speed, 3.1 into the ebb, and being a bit bashed as well. We've only got 14 knots on the nose, so that's not much. But we're here anyway, so let's stop faffing around and go inside and have a look to see if there's somewhere that we can spend the night. That's it there, that black wall right in front of us, and the entrance is on the end. That's what the entrance looks like. They're the sailing club boats that are all on the moorings there, but we're going on the wall. And we'll have to stick plenty of bits of fenders out there to look after the side the Swallow, or she'll bounce round like this swell. But if you look, we're mostly out of the swell there. The swell's going the opposite way. That's the swell coming in against us, and it's, if you look at the boats in the distance over there, the sailing club boats, you'll see them bouncing up and down, so they're getting most of the swell. The pier I'm on's called East Pier, but it sort of points in a direction of northwest, so I suppose northwest is protecting you from northeast, and that's why they call it the East Pier, but I'm not sure. And what's that in the water? Because it certainly looks like swimmers to me. Somebody checking the mooring strop and somebody swimming past. Well, you don't see that back home very often, and that's for sure. Well, this is it, Wicklow. Lovely little quaint town. And there's a must-visit jail here as well. Well, Swallow's bobbing a little bit now, but I'm sure she'll quieten down later on. I think it's possibly time for a tinny and something to eat. My heading to get where I wanted to go was 262 degrees, so I set that for the day, but the boat obviously followed the tide south. That was fine, because when the tide started to change and started to flood, I started to come back up with it, and it took me right through the gap where I wanted to go, missing most of the overfalls out, which I'm very glad. I don't know whether I sailed a shorter or a longer distance, but I do know I got brilliant speeds to get to this beautiful place. But now we're at an island, we're going to enjoy it. Bon voyage. Oh, I didn't. Okay, on that.
5, 4, 3.
Okay, I go 5, I go 3, 2, 1. Bon voyage, okay?
Bon voyage!